Another week down in your fantasy footy season. And has it been a kind start to you in SuperCoach or AFL fantasy yet? Don't you worry. Here at the Coaches Panel, we got you covered with this week's strategy session. We're going to help you with some player-specific dilemmas that you've got, helping you correct the information you need to make those informed 50-50 split decisions, helping you to know when, where, and how you should be looking in and at around restructures. What are the rookie moves you should be making? And I do want to talk fixture analysis. It feels a little early for some, but I think we're right on the ledges of some important points. We are talking all that on this week's strategy session. Joining me, though, on this episode for this first strategy session of 2025, a man that you've seen throughout our preseason of the 50 most relevant. Chances are, if you're looking to pick a captain in SuperCoach or on the Captain's Challenge, you should be almost imitating the moves that this man is encouraging you to give. He's an absolute star in the SuperCoach community. He's a part of the gang at Dr. SuperCoach. It is Pig Mentality. Hello, mate. Nice to see you. And wow, what a week of decisions we've got right in front of us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, MJ. It's always good to be on here. You're looking good. Hair's smick. Everything's going well. This is a bit of an interesting week because normally we talk about round 2 being like the really pivotal week for fix-ups and correctional trades and things like that. But also, I think we can throw round 3 in that basket this year, especially there's a lot of teams and players that have only played 2 games that are still on the bubble. So, you know, whether it's Bailey Smith because he missed a game or whether it's essentially Ryan Marich because he was subbed the first game, or even the Gold Coast and GWS guys that literally have only played 2, it kind of feels like we're getting an extra fix-up week than we potentially had in the past. And that can be really handy because there's still some brilliant rookies coming through. We can talk about this a bit later too. I'm also thinking it could be nearly a bit dangerous because we could then be 8 or 9 trades down without having done an upgrade because we've got so many options to correct on. So keen to chat about that, but yeah, really interesting week. And, you know, round 3 a few years ago probably wasn't that exciting, but now with still so many people on the bubble, it is still very relevant.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And even from an AFL fantasy perspective and a SuperCoach one, you get guys like a Langford who was sub and has barely played and now right on the precipice of an option, a Christian Moraes or a Riley Bice. Again, these early buys have created both pain points and potential opportunities for us. So I do want to get to these restructures and the rookie fix-ups because it wasn't just, as you mentioned, a last week issue. I feel like it's still there that we need to navigate coaches through, regardless of the fantasy format you play. But one of the things you've brought into the community, and there's others that have done it, but one of the things you're best known for in the community is being a leader of helping us understand fixtures, and not just in a generic sense, but position specific, and giving us some early data point trends. And I think you and I spoke about at the start of the preseason that it only really felt like a couple of teams we felt confident to say 2024's trend or the confirmation of, yeah, we think this is going to happen should eventuate. And pretty much any position against Richmond does still feel like a relatively favourable matchup. But I want to ask you, are there some early trends that you're seeing right now? Because historically, you know, a Max Gawn has been hard to score against. That's not as true. Port Adelaide have been hard to score against. It's not untrue, but it's certainly not as compounded as it's felt. We have in some cases only had 3 games of data, 2 games of data, 4 games of data. But before we get to a full set, are there any emerging trends that you are seeing in either players, lines, or opposition that could help us when we do start to get into the restructure or the upgrade cadence of our teams?
Yeah, there are a few things, and Max Gawn is one of them, actually, and I'll put Grundy in the same boat as well. Over the last few years, they've been what you'd call really restrictive ruckmen, you know, kind of winning 47% of their hit-outs has kind of been their gold standard. Like, that's a very high mark. They've always kind of dominated their games and won, I guess, the point scoring. But this year, both have given up a fair few. Grundy especially. Like, I don't know if he's potentially looking a bit washed or a bit past it maybe, but, I mean, he gave up like 126 to Lloyd Meek, 110 to Oscar McInerney, who's not a big scorer. like Luke Jackson got to a 97. I'm starting to see potentially that maybe Brodie Grundy isn't quite as restrictive as he has been in the past. I mean, even Max Gawn, like in round 2, allowed 136 to Tristan Cherry. And that was the game that Goodwin then came out and said there were personal issues going on after it. But even 109 to Witsy last week. So it's kind of, Gawn's not necessarily doing the real restricting that we thought he would. And maybe that's just Melbourne as a whole actually look pretty average. So it could also be part of that. But there are a couple that, we always tried to avoid or not get too focused on, or definitely don't captain someone against. But I don't know. I'm even nearly thinking if Cherry's healthy this week, I don't know what his hammy status is, but against Grundy, maybe that's actually a good matchup. Whereas in the start of the year, I would have said that's a hard one. So definitely those two guys. And then North Melbourne, actually, just as a whole, I think there's a general consensus from the community that's probably come back in from a few years out that North Melbourne are not that good and they give up a lot of points, but they've actually been restricting midfielders and even defenders lately. So they're not really giving it up. Like Rory Laird had 124 and Clary had 130, but they're kind of the only ones to go over 120 against North kind of in this year. So there isn't really, and they're not like monster scores either. They are pretty good, but North are probably not as easy as potentially people are thinking. I know when people are looking at the fixture and go, oh yeah, they've got North in a couple of weeks, and that's actually probably not as juicy as it used to be. And then the other one, I think I had been guilty of this as well, as bunching Richmond and West Coast together and just saying they're both really, really leaky for every position. And that's not quite true what we're seeing this year. We're seeing that West Coast to midfielders are by far the easiest team to score against, by far. But to defenders, they're kind of just middle of the pack. Like, they are positive, but it's not big. And then Richmond are the inverse, where they're giving up insane monster scores to defenders, but they're actually kind of capping the midfielders a little bit. So there's been 4 guys go 120 against Richmond this year, but no one's gone over 130, which you would have said, oh, Richmond's actually a real good target. These are SuperCoach numbers, by the way.
Of course.
But it checks out for AFL fantasy as well. So, yeah, there has been that kind of middle of the pack numbers, like 4 guys going 120 against Richmond, but no one really exploding going 130. Could that be Camden McIntosh just doing a little sit job run with that he did on Cripps and McRae? Didn't really slow them down that much, but maybe it just caps the ceiling a little bit. So, yeah, they're just some trends. And so me for my captaincy videos for SuperCoach captains, but also the captains challenge we've been playing. I noticed you've had a couple of good weeks in that, MJ, as well. Have you noticed any trends that you're targeting and teams you're picking on?
Yeah, there are some teams I'm picking on. It's rebounders against Richmond, and I'm actually fading inside mids for a number of different reasons. So a lot of people I'm seeing there that are Dunkley owners this week, or the Neil owners, this is my week. I'm like, yeah, no, it's Zorko if you're going to go anybody. Yeah. And then inside mids on West Coast. It's why I'm quite bullish on a Tom Green as a candidate for us this week as an upgrade option because of that very thing. I like that as an outlet. I'm hard fade still on Rucks against the Suns because I watched Max Gawn last week and, you talked about him. I think there's this unfair narrative that's emerged about Max this year. I'm keen on your take on this too, is he definitely went unders against Lockie Keefe. I think that's safe to say. It wasn't a bad score. It was still a captaincy level score. It's 120 across the formats, but I think owners were all expecting the 150. Dishes up the unicorn in reverse score of the 60s against Cherry. And then last week goes, 80s across the formats against Witts, who's the hardest ruck to score against. And now people are like, I'm getting him out of my side. I'm like, well, hold on. The reason you got Gawn is actually fixture-wise about to come. It's the Cats this week. It's Richmond in a couple of weeks. It's West Coast in a couple of weeks. Like, the reasons you got Gawn, you haven't even really got the gravy part of it yet. So to me, fixture analysis, there are trends we should be holding on to. Sometimes it's just the opposition that you play, but there are enough elements and threads that I like you have started to notice. It's like, or we just need to pull that for another week or two and see if is that a
Yeah, just keep an eye on it.
yeah, because Geelong aren't as leaky in certain positions as we thought they might have been. But is that who they play, or is that the conditions that they've played in? Like Hawthorn don't normally give up a crazy volume amount of marks to defenders like they normally did last week, but you look at the conditions and you go, oh, the Giants are playing keepings off for half the game because they do not want to get the ball turned over when they're kicking against a 5-goal breeze. So there are these interesting threads of data. How do you go about, maybe that's the question I should ask you, how long and or how do you differentiate between it's the environment of the match, it's just that one specific team? Like, where do you get to that point? Because once we're 10, 12 games into the year, the data's the data. But in these emerging trends, when you're trying to create positive deviation and separation, one of the things you're looking for to confirm or to clarify what is true and what's just an isolated incident.
Yeah, there's a few things, and like DFS Australia is a website a lot of us use to get our positional matchup fixture, and even looking at, like, you can look at the last 5 and the last 10. Even just looking at last 5 in itself can be a little bit dangerous because it can be so skewed one way. Like I looked at it the other day and it was saying Carlton a really easy matchup for inside mids, and I'm like, no, that doesn't ring true for me. But it was just because Jack Ross and Jai Newcomb had pumped them for 140s, which was kind of really skewing the data one way. And that can happen if you're just looking at 5 rounds. So it's probably a mix of looking at 5 and 10, last 10. But I think you can also get a fair vibe from watching the games as well. And I mean, teams like Port Adelaide haven't been playing that well, but they're also just a really low stoppage team, and like there aren't many goals kicked against them. So they're often really low scoring games. So last week, say Bombers playing them, Jai Caldwell looked like he had a down game on paper, but he was still the leading CBA guy for Essendon, still one of the better midfield scorers. So I wouldn't be worried about Jai. I'm worried about him now because it's just come out he's done a hammy.
Yeah.
But prior to that, I was still looking at trading in Jai Caldwell, even off a down game, but that's because he played Port, and you got to understand kind of that they are a low stoppage team. They don't have many goals kicked against them. Like the game against Adelaide the week before for the Bombers, I don't know what it would have been. It would have been like 35 CBAs or more, like probably more, just because of how many goals were kicked. Whereas in the Port game, there were half the amount of goals kicked. So there are half as many ball ups and less opportunities for Caldwell. So it is a bit of analysing that stuff as well. Or, yeah, there's a few bit goes into it, but I definitely think we need more than 3, maybe even more than 5 weeks to really get a pattern. But it is the people that identify it really quick and jump on that can get a bit of a leg up at times.
Yeah, it's true. And that's why, one of the great reasons I'm thrilled to have you on this podcast is you're giving us every time you're on just a little bit more education and understanding, a clarification that either corrects a mindset and or the kind of the validation of, yep, I'm heading in the right mindset with how I'm thinking and viewing the game. And so I always do like talking about fixture analysis and how those elements feed into the decisions we make, not just with who we put a captaincy on, but who we trade into. There's nothing worse than trading into a premium that delivers a poor force score for you. Hello, Bailey Dale coaches last week, or hello, those that jumped into a Jack Sinclair. Like there's like almost 100 points difference right there in how you're feeling about that one matchup, let alone any of the other elements. So I always enjoy that. Can I talk to you about rookies for a moment? Again, in SuperCoach and Dream Team, you have a 3-week price cycle, which means you do get a couple of weeks to look and watch at a player before their price inevitably moves. While for AFL Fantasy, the price cycle is actually longer, but you move price effective after every performed game. So the games do have differences when it comes to break evens and how quickly you should adapt and react to certain things. You've almost got to jump after week 1 in fantasy to maximize the cash. Whereas at least Dream Team and Supercoach, you can give yourself the luxury of 2 games and then make the move before it costs you any lost cash, so to speak. I think there's probably 3 genuine cash cows, genuine rookies that I think are on the conversation across the formats as trade ins. And then there's 3 genuine conversations you can put in the trade outs. There's others that are scattered through there, like a Dan Curtin, for example, probably in a, Max Hall's gone past these rookie territories. They're probably the two that are going to get away from a few people this year, in terms of, we probably would go back in time and change elements of our teams to jag those two guys for non-owners anyway. But let's talk about the outs first, knowing it's different across the formats, and then the ins. I think people are looking at Nevitt as a trade out option. I think people are genuinely looking at Camporelli as a trade out option. And then depending on the format, they've flirted with O'Sullivan and or Lindsay across the formats. Probably their three mid rooks to trade out. What's your take on looking at those guys as out options before we talk about the guys in? What's your reflection on whether or not it's fair, valid, accurate to move these guys in or out of your team?
There's a couple of things here. One is that I think some of my learnings last year were to not trade out as many rookies or as quickly. So if you've started someone, let's say it's a Connor Stone that hasn't necessarily been lighting the world on fire, but if there's no one necessarily a lot better than him or going to make, more, say 150K more than him or something, you probably could just hold him and let him just slow burn on your bench and make a bit. And not use the trade. But at the same time, there are and I was talking to Joven last year's winner, a lot of his theory is actually not about who you're trading in. It's who's not in your team that you're missing is kind of the thing that you really need to think about. And someone like a Moraes or a Bice that have these incredible negative break-evens that are potentially going to skyrocket, that's probably, I think, the mindset that people should have. It's not like who's in my team just cruising along and can go. It's more like who's not in my team that's really going to hurt me not to get. And I think these two potentially could. Like you just mentioned Hall and Curtin. I've been happy fading them, like a small forward for a not great team with Dan Butler coming back, and then a key forward for Adelaide who are flying. But will that keep up? So those kind of guys, I think there's justification for missing them. But guys like Bice and Moraes, I think with their negative break-evens and their really big scores, I think they are someone you could jump on, definitely. And in terms of trading out, I would probably prioritise trading out the guys that aren't playing. So that's your Camporelli in particular. It could be your Nevitt. There have been some whispers that Nevitt actually could have been injured and managed through that game and actually could be out a bit longer. So, I mean, I haven't seen the Geelong injury report, and even if it comes out, I don't know if we trust them. Yeah, even whatever Geelong say, I don't know if I trust Chris Scott. But look, if Nevitt's playing, I'm definitely holding him. I don't really care about a sub score impacting his cash gen. In SuperCoach, that's out in a couple of weeks. In AFL Fantasy, he's a bit more expensive now anyway, so you probably, you wouldn't be trading him in, but I think I'd just hold him and kind of ride it for a bit. He has made you a bit of cash, so maybe you could get off. Lindsay was the other one you mentioned. I'm really keen to hold him. They've said it's 1 to 2 weeks, but he is potentially one of our best moneymaker cash cows for the whole year. Like we think about these guys like Sam Darcy and Ollie Dempsey last year that went on to make whatever it was, 250K, 300, 400K. I think Lindsay and Levi Ashcroft are probably two of the ones that could do that this year. So I really, really want to hold Lindsay. And he's got, a 9 in SuperCoach. I'm not sure what it was in AF, probably similar in his rolling average. But it does come out in a few. And if he's actually a rookie that I would keep till his mid-season buy anyway. That's one of my learnings from last year. These elite 80 scoring rookies, actually just hold them to their buy.
Yeah.
So, he's one I think I'd like to keep.
I remember chatting with, one of our founders of the coaches panel. I make it sound like a cult when I phrase it like that. I'll find a better way to acknowledge Rids outside of that. But I remember he introduced at least the language of it, maybe not the ideology, but the language of bench hygiene into the fantasy community a couple of years ago, of making sure that, you can see a Lindsay, for example, he's missing 2 weeks. He might get the vest after that. I'm clearly talking worst case scenario now. And you're like, those 3 weeks of cash generation I'm missing. I'll jump on a Moraes now. Not saying that's the wrong decision to bring in a Moraes, for example, but it's like, well, you're taking out arguably the best cash generator. And those that faded Lindsay intentionally because you had multiple weeks to get there and faded even after this week, the luck has been on your favour incredibly, because that was, in my opinion, a horrific miss. It hasn't hurt you yet. It's going to. Make sure you fix it on the other side. But if you don't have a strong bench hygiene, you don't have those strong scoring cash cows at your M6, 7, 8, and you're upgrading around them, not upgrading on top of them when you think they're at that peak price. Like, you're just introducing rookies with low scoring, high vest, low job security. Like, that is not the way to generate cash in the game. So I'm with you. A player like Lindsay, under no circumstance should you be trading him. To me, it's just, he is the best rookie this year from a scoring perspective, as far as I'm concerned. So I couldn't do that. Camporelli or a Hasty, sure, they're going to be in and out of the side. That's fine. Never, sure, I'd hold if I had the choice, but not a disaster if you're jumping off. And O'Sullivan, I'd still even look for others, because from a pure football perspective, he looks better every week. Sometimes these slow builds work for us. So I'm with you on that. Talk to me about these ins then. Maybe the 3 ins of Moraes, Langford and Bice. Again, Langford's got the very different break even compared to Moraes, let alone Bice, who positionally is a little bit different. How do you go about helping coaches, because each team's unique, how do you help coaches make that informed decision about, is Moraes the number one for you, or is Bice the number one for you? Or do you go for the guy that of the 3 probably has arguably the best job security, based on the team he's in and the performance he showed in a Langford? What becomes the differentiator of, that's right for me and my team and my scenario?
I still value job security above everything in my rookies, because as we've seen with someone like Camporelli, he can have a couple of good games. He's got like something like a negative 44 break even in SuperCoach from off the top of my head, and then gets dropped and doesn't actually get to cash that in. So that's really annoying, and I don't want that happening to my rookies. So I still think job security is the most important thing, and that's why I'm actually keen to keep Lindsay, maybe even Nevitt, guys like that. Whereas someone like Stone, with a couple of the bad boy Giants coming back, he maybe could be in trouble. I don't know. But yeah, I still really value job security, but also the instant cash that some of the other guys are going to give you could be really nice. And I mean, Bice, let's start with Bice, because he was someone that everyone was really keen on last week. And now there's been the 3 rookies that would have gone out for him in Reed, Pryor and Trainer, all have massive spike scores. So do we actually need Bice? And because I'm definitely not a fan of running 4 rookies in defence with 2 on field when it comes back to best 22. I think you're flirting with a fair bit of danger there. I'm actually trying to get it so I've got no defender rookies on field by round 5. I probably won't be able to, because these guys have got awesome break evens. But so, in SuperCoach, maybe you could have Bice at your flex, maybe isn't that bad, but then you can essentially, when he's at your flex, you're comparing him to a Moraes, and Bice, he's been really good. Sydney do have a few defenders coming back, which could quite hurt him. It just came out today that there was a bit of a delay on some of them, like Mills and Robbie Fox have been delayed quite a bit. But I think there's Melick and potentially one other coming back, like
Cunningham,
1 to 2 weeks. So
yeah.
Cunningham, yeah. Then even Logan McDonald going into the forward line and pushing McCartan back into defence is the word. So there is still some Bice job security concerns. So I would, if you've got him, I wouldn't be worried. Well, you obviously just ride it. But I'm probably a bit more worried about his job security than the others. So I'd probably put him 3rd. Langford, I do quite like, and I think he's a good player. Obviously, subbed the first game, so he's not kind of rocketing away from you yet. But his game last week was great, and Melbourne looked really bad. I don't know if they're in full tank mode yet. It's probably too early to say that, but I think they do need to blood a lot of these rookies and actually give them fair game time. So he's someone I do kind of like. He was really highly rated, a bit of an accumulator. But he's also like very much the same player as Clayton Oliver. So will they actually play them both big midfield minutes? I'm not really sure. Moraes is one that I really, really like. And we spoke about it before we started recording, that there's a bit of division in the community. Some love him and think he's a must-have, and some think he's a bit of a trap. I'm in the camp of I love him, and he played the wing role amazingly on the weekend against Essendon. And chatting to some of our port guys in Slack, they're crying out that that's a position that they really need someone good at. Like Jace Burgoyne's done a really good job of that recently. He might be on one wing, or he was actually pushed into the back line last round. So I don't think Butters coming back impacts Murray's because they play totally different positions. So I quite like him. The break even is insane in all the formats. So yeah, I think he's probably my number one, and mainly because it's a combo of both. It's the scoring, the break even, and I genuinely think he has pretty good job security.
What probably scares people off about Moraes a little bit is the fact that it's the second last match of the round, and the sub is always there as a risk point. Just ask any Mitch Nevitt owners around that, and that's always the risk factory that sits through there. But again, with our final week of buys, which is a really important point you've brought up, this is our last chance to get protected with these failed rookie scores or these sub-vest scores or the injury impacted scores across the formats, where it's just not going to sting from a ranking perspective or an overall points perspective. So to me, I'm with you. I think if you're trading into any pure mid this week, across the formats, Moraes is the one. Who and however you get there, while important, whether it's Nevitt because he's topped up or topped out in your perspective, whether you're trying to get off a dead option in a Hasty or a Campo or maximising flex, however you're getting there is important. But I think getting Moraes, if a pure mid, is probably the top priority. He may not be my top trade option, but we'll talk about that later in the episode when we go through that. But I think if you're going into any pure mid, it's got to be Moraes from my perspective. And speaking of these rooks, you mentioned how players like Trainer popped, Reed popped, and Pryor popped for us last week. Now, popped in contextual terms of a defensive rookie. And then Bice comes through there. Hall is still attainable. Whether or not you should get him is a different conversation. Same as Curtin. Davidson, his ownership across the format's so high that you should have him anyway. So you've got these rookies that are popping big, good scores. And Moraes certainly sits in that level as well. Noddy's been amazing. There's our one per podcast. Minnie, you can't hate me. I've snuck it in for you, my friend. We've got all these rookies that almost give us the confidence that, man, we had the magic wand to go back 5 weeks. We'd go probably a guns and rooks approach outside of a couple of forward options. But I want to ask you about how we restructure, and should we be restructuring our team? Because there's a few mid prices that still hanging around like a bad teenage smell in some of our teams. And then probably arguably worse, guys we've paid big chunks of change for that are not quite popping for us. So, a Sanders I don't think has hurt you, but it's probably not helped you in your team. A Perryman I know is still floating around in a decent chunk of teams. Look, in AFL Fantasy, you'd probably put Will Day in that space, maybe not as much in Supercoach, given he's just come off a ton, but look, you might put him in that area. Christian Petrarca would sit in that space. Maybe it's unfair, but English or even a Gorn could sit in that. And probably the most notable I paid up for and felt like I got trapped off the preseason based on what he looked like and what he's delivered the last 3 weeks, being a Jason Horn-Francis. There is a cross community of, geez, if I don't change my structure now to get into a guy that I desperately want, or get off of a guy before it really stings, this is kind of it. So I guess my question for you, Pig, is when is it okay to make changes that alter your team structure? And when are you just getting emotionally reactional and not thinking through it clinically?
Well, I think if people do want to change their structure, it has to be last week and this week. Because we're kind of finishing the best 18 now. The way I'm viewing it, it's these best 18 weeks are ways to get you, they're just preparation weeks to get you ready for the best 22. So best 22 rounds 5 to 11, I think that's when we'll start to see real separation in the rankings. They're so congested at the moment. Like there's probably 100 points between thousands and thousands of ranks. So I'm viewing these couple of weeks as, I'm doing the trades to set me up for what I want my team to look like in round 5 when it's best 22. And you just mentioned guns and rookies being the right approach. And I think it's the right approach for best 18, but I think it's going to get really found out come best 22. So I'm actually going the other way and trying to get it won't be possible to do all, but as many rookies off field as possible by round 5. Like I'm probably only going to have 4 rookies on field in round 5. And, they might be like a Nod and a Davidson and a Lindsay. And I'll probably have to have one defender one because they haven't made their cash yet.
Yeah.
But that's how I'm viewing it. Like I'm saying restructure now. And there are people that are like, say, trading a Jason Horne-Francis and splitting him into, say, a Humphrey and a Marek. And I can't really dissuade that at the minute because that's probably the structure that they're going to be happy with in best 22, where it's, 2 kind of 80 scorers as opposed to one. Let's even say Jason Horne-Francis gets back to the 105 we want. Maybe that those 2 guys are actually better than a Horne-Francis and a Kako
60.
or something on field.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So now's definitely time to restructure, but there is some overreaction that I'm definitely seeing. And when you pay $650K for a guy like Max Gawn or even Cherry or Sheasel or Neil that's letting you down, I can absolutely see the frustration. I remember I had that with LDU and Tim English last year. But my big philosophy this year was not paying up for anyone. So I didn't start anyone over 600K in SuperCoach this year. Didn't start anyone over $1 million in fantasy. And I'm feeling so calm this year. Like my premiums, and I'm looking at Petrarca and Dawson. Dawson's been good. It was just last week it was a little down. But let's say it's Petrarca and Jason Horne-Francis. I'm not actually that upset that they're giving me 80s. Like, yes, it's not great, but when I only paid 550, they might only go down 50, 60, 70K, and then I'm pretty confident they'll come back up. So I'm actually feeling really calm, and people can't go back and do the not start anyone over 600, but what they can do is with their trade-ins coming up when we start upgrade season is just continue to look for value. And so in SuperCoach, that's like, I'd say don't trade anyone in over 550K generally if you can, and like your first upgrades. AFL Fantasy, try and pick off people in the 800 or 900Ks. Like, I mean, Lucky Neal in Fantasy could be a really awesome trade in a couple of weeks. Yeah. He's going to be like low 800s, might even be less. So pick off those guys that can get you 90s, 100s, 110s for cheap, and don't like kind of worry about like you've missed Zorko now. Let him go.
Yeah, 100%.
The winner Jovan last year didn't get Luke Ryan, didn't get Caleb Sarong, didn't get Zach Butters all year. Even when they're going nuts, everyone was trading them in for 650. He went against that and just said, I don't care. I'll just keep picking off the 550 guys as they come down. I know they'll come back up. So that's what I really want to encourage people to do. I had a good chat to Mini Monk about it in the preseason as well, about what is the purpose of every position in your team. So someone for me like Jaden Short, yes, he's disappointing. He's not I wanted him to make some money, but his role is also to just churn out 90s, keep rookies off field, and just be a placeholder until like a Sheasel comes off his bye. So Jaden Short for me is actually doing his job.
Absolutely.
Like, I'm not actually that worried about him. I would still like him to make 50 to 80K.
Absolutely.
It might be a tough ask, but if he literally is the same price at his buy as he started with, I'll be a little bit disappointed, but I actually won't care that much because he's just kept a rookie off field. He's given me 90s. Harry Sheasel's dropped in price. Let's say Sheasel's dropped 100K. Short hasn't made money, but it's essentially 100K difference between them now. So, yeah, that's where I'm sitting. It was a long way of saying just keep targeting value, but also probably don't overreact to the guys that are dropping in cash because you only lose out if you actually trade them out. Like if you have gone at 650, he goes down to 550, then he might go back up to 620. It doesn't actually really matter. But if you trade him out at 550, you've lost 100K.
Correct. The price of a player you own only matters when you jump off them. It matters to everybody that doesn't have them because this is now the new accessible price. But you end up, if you make that decision to jump off, you're compounding the loss of points that you probably got as well as the loss of cash. And so could you or should you jump out of using a Horn Francis, for example? Of course you can. Be my guest, especially if that nets your overall team structure in a genuinely better place and you're using it because you're like, nah, that was a mistake I'm correcting. That's a very different mindset to, I don't like what you're scoring, therefore I'm moving away. They're totally different ideologies. One is a tactical maneuver. The other is a reactional decision. And no super coach, no fantasy team, no draft team ever is at its best when you're in a place of frustration at a object like fantasy footballing. Like, because of this, you're out the door. It's like, you're just not going to make a great decision like that. It's got to hold water and it's got to make sure it doesn't leak. And then if luck is against you, that's just the life of fantasy footy sometimes. So I'm with you. I'm not opposed to restructure, but it's got to be this week. Knowing that the poor scores, the overabundance of rooks, the sub-vests, the whatever it is that you've been able to protect the last fortnight, this is your last chance to get it right. Because as you said, everything is so condensed right now. It is not a reality of where you are. You might have a crap ranking or you might be top 1,000 and you're thinking, I am amazing. I'm much more interested right now in, where does your team value sit? What is your cash generation looking like right now? How are you actually going about increasing the value of your team to ultimately get you into positions to make upgrades at a faster cadence than what others are going to be able to? That, to me, I'm much more interested in. Yeah, if you've had 5 or 6 bad decisions, it's going to be really hard to catch up, especially in AFL fantasy, where everybody's got 2 trades a week and there's no boosts that add a different variance, or people that are a bit more conservative can have some late runs at the fantasy. It's, man, if you're stuck too far behind after about 8 weeks, year's over, mate. Like, in terms of like winning at all, like, year's just over. It's just harder to be able to catch the pack. I know some would say it's a little hyperbolic to state that, but everyone's got the same level of accessibility, and within a week, everybody's in the same space as you. So it's very hard if you start slow to get ahead. SuperCoach, there's more trade variables to kind of change that up, to at least make it not as early in the year to, throw the white flag up and go, year done, I'm focusing on leagues or anything like that, or onto the captain's challenge for the year, whatever it is, the focus. But how do you make these 50-50 decisions, Pig? Because maybe we should use SuperCoach for an illustration point again. There is some torn community angles of, is Marich the better buy or is Humphrey the better buy? Wednesday night, I'm dropping a video on our YouTube channel that's my top 10 trade targets in SuperCoach for the coming week. So you'll be able to check that out Wednesday night, depending on when you're watching or listening to it. It could already be out on the platform for you there. But it is the dilemma that for a lot of coaches, it's, yep, Moraeus fine. Now what do I do with these guys? And don't give me that stupid Eldorado taco person, go for both. You can do that, but we're going to help people make the decisions about when you're stuck with these 50-50s. Again, Humphrey and Marich are the illustration, but the hope is to thread out for you when you are stuck on, do I do this or do I do that? Do I do this or do I do that? So that's what we want to do. So what are the factors for you? Again, using Marich and Humphrey as the illustration, what are the factors for you that you use, Pig, to go, I will choose player X over Y because of these reasons? What are the variables you use to make that decision?
Well, in this case, I am going to taco them, and I'm going to trade both in Marich and Humphrey this week because I love them both. But okay, you've asked me to say why one over the other.
Yes.
In general, I would look at things like, it's probably sustainability of the scoring that you really want to try and predict for me. It's so Humphrey, and that a lot of times comes from role. So Humphrey playing a kind of half forward, pushing into CBAs. Even when he was at half forward, he was getting around a lot of stoppages. That's awesome, but it's also a role that can be quite volatile in scoring. And if you're not having a good week or your team's not playing well, it can be hard to kind of sometimes keep up that scoring. So whereas, a guy with the pigging the kick-ins for the worst team in the league and actually looking like racking up 25 disposals the last 2 weeks and looks like a great kick and they want to get in his hands, like that to me is probably more sustainable role scoring than someone starting forward and pushing up stoppages. I do like both their roles. I think Humphrey can keep going. I don't think so. And then what they've done in the past, so like Humphrey's 200s in Supercoach are great, but I wouldn't expect him to keep doing that. Like he might drop down to kind of an 80s average guy. So then working out if he does that, try and be realistic with what you're projecting them scoring, but then also, put in a price projector and see how much cash they'll make doing that for a month. And same with Marek as well. Like you might predict he's more like 75s or 80s, but put in a projector, see how much they're going to make. But when splitting one like that, I think it's role, but role to look at, what's more sustainable and who can keep doing it for longer. Whereas, who was potentially a flash in the pan, because anyone can just pop out a ton out of nowhere or even 2 tons out of nowhere and then not keep it up. Like, we've seen Jai Simpkin in previous years play that kind of half forward pushing into CBA role, and he'll have tons, then back it up with 50s. So that role can be tough. But we just routinely see the main kicking guy in a bad team just pick it up. So that's kind of how I split them. Like I personally have Marich over Humphrey, but actually I really like them both and would like to trade them both in. I annoyingly actually had Marek in all week last week. He was one of my trade-ins. But then I had Davidson's E and did a silly getting greedy to trade in a Hamling to try and take that 129. And then Marek did a 123 or whatever to nearly match him. Like that's a learning. That was annoying. I was really happy to get on Marek early, and I mean a couple other guys identified that as someone we wanted. And then I got a little bit greedy, but I'll just correct that this week and get him this week for 40K more.
I think that's really helpful. I agree. Role is super critical. And especially in this position where they are in the same line, you're not looking at what's the scoring threshold of what it takes to be at the upper echelons or to generate the amount of cash. It's got to be about role in the team. I want to ask you then off the back of that, does opponents' fixture and or break even become an important variable in that decision too? Because when I look at the next 2 weeks for Gold Coast, they've got Adelaide and North Melbourne. And we just talked about before, right at the top of the episode, that North aren't the easy beats through that midfield that they'd historically been. And the Crows, that you can only beat who you beat, but they do seem to be harder to score against. Again, whether that's opposition or a new data reality, we need more trend on. Whereas from a West Coast, it's Carlton. I think it's the Giants this week. And almost regardless, good kicks in bad teams in defence, fixtures almost feel irrelevant for. Maybe it's even better coming up against teams that have multiple goal scoring options through there. So do those factors ever sit for you, the fixture that's upcoming and or the break evens in these 50-50 decisions? Or is it much more about role in the ecosystem they're playing in?
It depends at what price point you're trading them in, I think. So for rookies, not as worried about fixture. Like it's probably more role and are they staying in the team and doing the role we want. Premiums, absolutely, definitely about fixture. And it's all about, who they're playing in the next few to, will they rise in price? When we're looking at premiums as well, I think you should definitely take into account the buys, the mid-season buys. So if they're playing that round 12 early buy, I avoided Bailey Dale purely on the round 12 buy. Whereas someone like Jordan Clark or, Lockie Whitfield now coming off his buy, they've got much better buys. So I definitely would take that into account. With premiums, mid-prices and rookies, I probably wouldn't as much because they're probably traded out by the time you get to the buys potentially. And when we're splitting Marek and Humphrey, like they've both got really good mid-season buys. They're both right at the end of that kind of block. So not too worried about that. But yeah, definitely fixture for premiums and even probably fixture for mid-prices. Like I was really keen, and a few of us in Slack were really keen on Jake Bowie last week. Not only one of us actually went through and pulled the trigger and got him. A few bailed, but that was because of his fixture. Like he had Gold Coast, who are actually, this is one I didn't mention earlier, they are just as leaky as St Kilda to defenders right now. Like Gold Coast are giving it up to defenders big time. So the fact that Jake Bowie had them, then he had Geelong, who's actually giving it up a bit, and who Essendon have been giving it up. So, and then Freo are reasonably okay for defenders. So Jake Bowie had this awesome run coming up for defenders, and yeah, that was what got me interested. You know, his 2 90s in a row were nice, and his break even was nice, but it didn't excite me that much. It was the upcoming fixture where I thought, actually, this guy could keep that up. And he'd played 2 harder, well, not as easy defender matchups, and still did 90s. So it's looking about what they've done before as well. So sometimes we look at like, this guy's averaging 100, but he's actually played two really tough teams. So, you know, maybe his adjusted average is actually like 108. And now he gets some really easy matchups. So I would expect him to go 112 or something. So, yeah, seeing who they've played is also really important as well. So someone like Jake Bowie was someone we identified as having a really good run. I didn't jump on him. It probably would have been really nice for those that did. But, yeah, fixture definitely for mid-prices and premiums.
Yeah, for sure. Before we wrap up the podcast, there's a couple of players you want to put on the conversation radar for us. Either they're divisive or people in the community are still unsure, or whatever it is. Who are the players you want to put on the discussion radar before we wrap up this episode?
Well, the first one is someone that you and I talked about in the 50 most relevant, and that's Matt Flynn.
Oh, no.
The Eagles ruckman that we both agreed, if he's in the team, is going to be a really good cash cow.
Yes.
We were worried that he'd get injured and not be in the team, but he's not in the team just out of he's healthy and playing waffle. So he's a really divisive one because a lot of people have him at R2, especially in SuperCoach because he's rookie priced.
Yeah.
I've also got him in fantasy because I thought he could be a good cash cow there. So I know a lot of the first week he was dropped, so round 2, I think we kind of got saved by Best 18 because he was out, Baz Smith was out, Tom Stewart was an injury on minimal. So a lot of people held Flynn round 2, but I think people are starting to lose a bit of patience now and people are trading him out. I want to get your thoughts around Matt Flynn because I'm still holding him, and my thought is actually that I'm going to hold him this week as well. And then if he's not back in round 5, that's when it becomes a really big problem because then it's best 22 and I don't want to be carrying a donut. So I'm actually giving him one more week to come back and I've got a backup plan if he's not back. What are you thinking? Do you still own Flynn or
No,
where are you at?
I'm off the Flynn train. I jumped off at the end of round 2 because there was a rookie that I was like, I missed that guy. I had to correct that. I was like, nah, I missed that guy and I didn't want to wait. So I made that move in another line. Then I was like, nah, I need to make that move. He was sitting at flex for me. In SuperCoach, I am still running Gorn and De Koning. So I was like, I had that flexibility to be able to make that move and pivot out. I think for owners that are still sitting there, because it's more SuperCoaches than fantasy or dream teamers that have him, you are protected with an extra wait week. And then you do have some others that we can trade into as still viable trade options. Like Langford, as good as he is in SuperCoach, right? He's got a break even, I think it's of 2. So even a 70, he's still attainable, probably under 250,000 next week. I'm still okay to trade into a guy with the scoring and job security. So you've got an outlet like that. You've also then had a couple of price movements, more likely on the downward side of guys like a Cherry or a Gorn, that while you might not want to go up to them just yet, you are certainly getting into them at a cheaper price point than what others are, let alone anything else. And gosh, an Archer Reed, if he keeps knocking out 80s like he did last week for those that still have him, that's not exactly a disaster either. So to me, I'm comfortable to wait a week in SuperCoach because we're protected. Fantasy, I'd be a bit more, man, this is just dead cash. It's a lot of money sitting on the bench. I'd want to activate that and turn that into money that's working for me on field and turn that into somebody else, whether it be a Marich, a Moraes, a Bice, any of these other good money makers. Again, on the channel already, an AFL Fantasy Trade Target episode is out on YouTube. That one has been done. It's been out for about 24 hours now. So in fantasy, unless he's named, for me, it's an absolute trade. SuperCoach, if you can't get to Moraes, you can't get to Humphrey, you can't get to Marich, and you desperately want to get to all 3 of those guys that are lone bias, I'm okay to move him on. I'm also okay to wait a week.
Yeah, and a part of that, I think, from what you're saying, is if you had him in flex, whereas there are a lot of people with it in R2, which
Yeah,
obviously you
it's
can't go
different.
to one of those positions. So, I mean, Flynn R2 guys, which I'm one of, my thinking is hold him another week for best 18. You're
Yep.
kind of a bit protected there.
Mm.
I'm really eyeing off Kieran Briggs coming off
Oh, you
his
should be.
game this week. He's going to be like 650, 670. Oh, no, sorry, 450, 470K in Supercoach. He'll be very cheap for what he can do in AFL fantasy as well. In Supercoach, that single digit will roll out of his price cycle. It's still there in fantasy, but it has less weighting. Plus, he could actually destroy West Coast and kind of just, reset his break even this week anyway. So Flynn is actually my pivot and parachute. No, Briggs is my pivot and parachute off Flynn at
Yep, I
R2.
agree.
So I'm holding one more week and just waiting for Briggs to probably drop 50K.
Yep. Oh,
I'm
I
still
think
giving
Briggs is
Flynn.
an option in flex next week for others that already are
Absolutely.
locked into Ruck. He feels like the first early option and easy pathway to the Cherry, the Gorn, the Marshall, whoever you missed. I love the Briggs call.
Yeah, so he's definitely someone I'm looking at. I'm still giving Flynn another week to come back because I
Yep.
still think he's going to be one of the best cash cows they're playing. But I
Agree.
think best 22 is where we just have to draw the line. You just can't hold him in that.
Yeah, it's too much money
Yes,
that's inactive.
yeah, that, and even in Supercoach and Dream Team where it's best 23, best 22, you have 23 scorers. You're just removing. It means you have to take every single score. So you have to
Yeah,
take a
correct.
Stuart 9 or a, you know, even a
Lindsay
Levi
12.
Ashcroft 30. Yeah.
Oh gosh. Yeah. No,
So yeah,
that's
that's someone that I want to chat about. I think we've covered it pretty well. And in AFL fantasy, there is probably too much money on his head to keep
yep.
to keep holding. And Briggs could get close to his break even in AFL fantasy
Well,
potentially. Supercoach's break even is crazy, and he won't get
it's
near it. But
202 or something like that. It'd
yeah,
be
yeah,
amazing if he got it, but yeah.
yeah. Well, it is West Coast, so you
It's
never
true.
know. So yeah, that's where I'm thinking with that. And so I'd recommend AFL fantasy players trade. The other two potentially hold. Maybe Dream Team you trade. I'm guessing he's a bit more expensive in that, but
Yep.
yeah, that's kind of where I'm sitting at the minute.
Any other players
And
you want to put
then
on the radar?
the other guy's Bailey Smith because he there was actually a lot of faders. I didn't realize there were going to be people fading Bailey Smith. And
Yeah.
then he popped out that 140 in round one, and all the faders made it clear that they'd faded and made a huge mistake.
They had.
And then he was out with a calf injury, and all the faders made it very clear that they'd made the right call.
The victory lap goes on, yeah.
Yeah. So it seems like there are a lot of people that don't own Bailey Smith, and I'm seeing a lot of people still wanting to fade him because they're seeing these Marek and these Humphreys and these Murrays pop up, and they want to get them instead. I want to get your thoughts on that because I think that is a big mistake. Because I think the guys like Bailey Smith, Jack McRae, Caleb Daniel, these kind of like lower price guys that are probably keepers are
Mm.
actually the ones that win you your season and get you really good ranks. And getting on them at the right time, which is before their price rise, is
Yep.
actually the most important. If it's someone like Humphrey or Marek that you're probably going to be trading out, you can get that cash from a rookie. You're not going to get the
Correct.
scoring potentially, but Bailey Smith, I think, is a keeper. And I've done my captaincy research, and I think he's going to absolutely destroy Melbourne this week. So you're probably potentially going to get priced out really, really quickly. So I want to get your thoughts on Bailey Smith for non-owners, and do you agree that he's actually the most important trade in this week?
Oh, the most important trading. So he's
Yeah,
based
big
on an
call.
ownership. That's a big call, but I don't think it's unfair. So he's in 75% of teams in AFL fantasy, and he's in, I think it's about 67, 68 in Supercoach. So it's probably a loud minority that are the Bailey
Yep.
Smith faders, which is certainly there. I understood why people, and I don't agree, but I understood why people faded him in Supercoach and why they traded him out once he was the laid out. I understood it because in Supercoach, you're at least protected with the 2 weeks to look before the price movement hits. So while I would never advocate for that for the reasons that you just articulated beautifully for us, I would at least go, I get it. It's not my style, but I get it. Trading out of him in AFL fantasy, to me, we'll see in the light of day if it's a good decision. The reason I didn't like it in AFL fantasy was because it forced you to have to trade back into him the week he was named because of the weekly price cycle movement. If you missed that, you missed a massive amount. And like he went up 77K last week in AFL fantasy, and it was a telegraph force trade that you had to do. I'm never a fan of doing that. So to me, trading out of him in fantasy, look, I know some people did it, and I hope for their sake it works out. To me, it felt wrong because it limited what you could have done, but I understand that. To say he's the most important is huge, but I don't think I'd go against a Bailey Smith. For so many reasons, I wouldn't go against it. Not only because I think he's top line potential, not only because of his proven history, not only because of his scoring capacity that we've seen now at least once in Supercoach and now multiple weeks in fantasy, let alone the fixture analysis king himself is letting us know that this is top 5 captaincy territory. Definitely VC, probably more likely given where it sits in the fixture anyway, with Bailey Smith. And then to throw on top, for the faders, you're going against 70% of the community. You are now on your own. And the worst place to be on a player is on your own where everybody else is. I'll get that cash generation out of Moraes. I'll get that cash generation out of Bice. I'll get that cash generation out of Langford. I'll get that cash generation elsewhere. To think I'm going to get it more than Humphrey of Smith, it just feels like, yeah, that might be true, but you're also going to miss a guy that's much more convincing to me of being a stronger scoring option for longer for the year. And so while money matters, to deny an arguably gift of a value of a guy that's shown he's got 130 plus scoring on his head and now coming up against some really nice matchups over the next sort of 6 weeks. It's not all gravy for Geelong, but it's not all hard. I'll take the 2 or 3 games he misses with management of his health or his body. I'll deal with that and be with the pack than rather go against him. I would rather be, for sake of a better phrase, wrong, but with everybody else, than be right and be that space. So to me, I think Bailey Smith, if you're one of the 30 coaches that don't have him, you've got to correct the course now. To me, that is a high priority. Absolutely.
Yeah. And just to clarify, he does have 3 tough matchups in his next 5. So he's got Hawthorn, Carlton, and I was just looking at the other one was GWS. So they're all tough ones. So he does have 3 tough ones. But he also has Melbourne this week, who I think is going to be a spike score. They have looked pretty bad. And they're giving up the second most points to midfielders and wingers. So that could be danger areas. And then he also has, there was another easy, Freo in there, which actually that's someone who were tougher last year and have actually been a bit easier this year. So whether that's without Hayden Young, who knows? But essentially, there's 2 good games in there for Baz. There's 3 harder ones, but I'm still not too worried as an owner. Like, he's just so cheap. I think and for his keeper status, that I do think he's someone that people should be going and getting over a Humphrey or a Moraes or a Bice. Marek is the one that I'd and ah, but I think there could be a way to get both, potentially.
Yeah, I think you could. And oddly enough, I'm probably the most bullish on Marek this week as an option, because I think the games who he's coming up against, the position and the role that he has, and while he doesn't have the best break even compared to others, I go, who's got the pathway that feels like it's easiest to get there? Marek, in contrast to Humphrey, feels to me that's the right play. If you went both, no problem. If you go one, I'd lean to Marek first. But I think Moraes is pretty critical this week for us too. I think for some teams, Bice is important, and certainly for the 30% of coaches that don't have Bailey Smith. Whew, good luck trying to fit all these 5 needs in early days. There's some big and interesting trades to come for us this week, Pig.
Yeah, for sure. And just that kind of goes back to the restructure conversation of, let's say you've got Lockie Neal and you're not happy with him, then I'm really against the sideways primo. So if it's like Lockie Neal and you're just going to whoever's a good premium going well, like if it's Neal to Dunkley, I really don't like that. But if it's splitting Neal and it's your way to get Smith and Marek, and it's actually fixing up the structure you want and getting rookies off field, which I
That's
still
different.
think is going to be really, really important come best 22.
Yeah.
That's when I would tick off trading out a premium. It's not a sideways, it's a split to restructure. And this is probably the last week you can do it, because then we're into
Yeah.
best 22 and then we're starting upgrade season.
Yeah. We're about to find out probably in about 3 weeks' time who's been swimming and decided skinny dipping was a perfectly good option and nobody would notice.
Yeah.
And in about 3 weeks' time with a rank, we're about to find out, who's not prioritized bench hygiene? Who's just been chasing points? Who's not been prioritizing generating the right player cash and fixing up their structure? And who's just been hunting what's been happening in the here and now? While you don't want to have a slow start, you don't want to burn multiple trades, regardless in fantasy or supercoach, whether they're infinite of 2 a week or they're a little bit more limited like supercoach is. Every trade has a value. They feel more valuable in the back end of the year than they do at the front, but every trade has value. And if you're just frivolous with them, if it's not improving your team, if it's not fixing something or improving it in another way, why the heck are you doing it? Every trade's got to get you one step closer to at least what you believe is a better outcome for your team. If it's not doing that, check yourself before you wreck your team. That's for sure. Hey, mate, an absolute privilege talking fantasy footy with you. We could do it for hours. Our better halves probably would not prefer us to do that. But, mate, always a pleasure. Where can we keep in touch with you? I know you're dropping the weekly SuperCoach Captaincy episode for us, which has some great threads for AFL fantasy coaches, because you're not just talking SuperCoach numbers. You're talking game, you're talking analytics, you're talking fixture, you're talking venues. I haven't heard you talk about temperature on field just yet, but maybe that could be introduced into the lexicon if we're lucky. Where can people get in touch with you during the week, and where's some of those content you're dropping for the SuperCoach and the broader fantasy footy community?
Yeah, I haven't talked about temperature yet, but I talked about precipitation last week, so I'm getting some weather things in there.
You're getting close.
Yeah. I'll find a hot game and chat about it.
Thanks, mate.
But essentially, yeah, you can find me on Twitter at pig_DRSC. It's the main Dr. Supercoach page on there as well. But a lot of the stuff I'm putting out at the moment is on YouTube. So just search up Dr. Supercoach on YouTube, and that's where I'm dropping a lot of stuff, including, as you said, the weekly captains videos is the main thing, and it's Supercoach tailored, but like you said, it's still AFL fantasy relevant as well. And like you said, you and I are participating in that captains challenge website, which is AFL fantasy scoring. And I'm essentially translating my Supercoach picks, doing my Supercoach research and just plugging them in and hoping they go well in AF as well. And like going very well in that, and went very well in that last year as well. So it does translate. It definitely translates. So yeah, that's where you can find me as well.
Make sure you go and check it out. Look, we'll drop the video channel and also the places where you can get in touch on the social media platform of X in the description of this episode. You're always so generous with your time, not only with us, but just the fantasy and the Supercoach community at large. Big, we appreciate you. So make sure you go back, give him a follow on X and check out the video, because it's one of the best captaincy analysis tools that are there. And it's in and out in about 15 minutes too. It gives you vice captain options, captains, tells you when you should and how you should make those things. Probably one of the best resources that's rocking around for the Supercoach and captain decisions that you're making. And it helps you with whether or not you should be upgrading into a certain player this week, because he'll help you to know who's got some good matchups. Don't just use something for what it's marketed as. Use it for what it's actually helping you understand, which is good matchups, favorable outcomes. And if the price is right, maybe it's the right move to jump on. Hey, if you're just checking out the coaches panel for the first time, well, grateful to have you here. Welcome to the channel. If you've not followed us on social media, all the details are also in the description of this episode. We drop these weekly strategy sessions as an audio podcast for you right here at the start of the week. Make sure you check it out. And then we also drop them as a video episode on YouTube. If you haven't liked the channel over there, make sure you do so, subscribe. And on a Monday night and a Wednesday evening, we also drop an AFL fantasy exclusive and a SuperCoach exclusive top 10 trade targets episode. So you'll be able to go and check them out. And also on the channel, we're about to drop the Keeper platform has a set of brand new position allocations that are about to land in the game at the end of round 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and 18. If you've drafted on the Keeper platform, a new set of positions are about to come. And I just saw the list drop into my screen as we've recorded this episode. And my goodness me, we are about to get a bounty of new positions that will hopefully help you. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and we can't wait to be back with you on the channel real soon, talking about your fantasy football side and hopefully able to help you have your best year yet.